Hello, my name's Niranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast, learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Today is episode number 113, and I had the pleasure of talking to Cody Peterson, a first-time author. Cody has been a thoughtful student of spirituality and religion since his adolescence, and he takes his own spiritual practice very seriously, believing that his recovery and life depended on it. He defines his own version of meditation and yoga as highlighting books and sharing what he's learned through his writing and talks, the central feature of his day-to-day routine. To the delight of his family, including his two amazing adult children, Cody finally sobered up over 11 years ago after spending time living on the streets of Las Vegas, Nevada. And he feels an urgent need to give back by carrying the message to newcomers to the 12th step through volunteering at a number of drug and alcohol rehabilitation centers and detox facilities at any chance he can. I trust that you will enjoy the conversation. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Cody. How are you, Cody?
Good. How are you?
I am well. I am curious and very, very excited to have this conversation with you to share about your journey of addiction, but also a little bit of the Jung philosophies and how you've incorporated them in your own sense of being and self, and how that has been a process in itself as you've written your book.
Sounds exciting to me. I am my favorite topic. So
I love it. Beautiful. So talk to me about what is it you believe about yourself, having gone through the trials and tribulations of life, as we all supposed to. It's part of the journey. And does it define who you are at this moment?
well, I do appreciate this question. I think if I was to define myself today, it would be, which may sound surprising, but I consider myself, I think first and foremost, an alcoholic, which is shocking. I haven't had a drink or used a drug for over 11 years, and I felt, quite safe and protected from, I guess, that compulsion, if you will.
Mhm.
But what I discovered, especially through reading Jung and writing my book, is that there's a lot of power that is to be mined from one's own darkness. And so for me, the alcoholic has almost come to be representative of something of an archetype. And Jung taught that archetypes typically they're sort of bipolar. So on one hand, there's a negative aspect, on the other hand, there's a positive aspect.
Right.
And what the alcoholic archetype is for me is, on one hand, it's sort of the most depraved parts of human nature, of humanity. Um, you know, there's sort of an alcoholic trope that I guess describes the worst of humans,
Mhm.
in a sense, or the worst of individuals, probably.
Right.
But on the flip side, for example, like in Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, there's literally millions of people who have recovered from that negative aspect of the archetype, and who now, for them, the word alcoholic carries a certain power because it's indicative of a person who's undergone a profound transformation. And so what is manifested out of the darkness of that experience now becomes a catalyst for a journey into the light. And so for me, if I say that, I'm an alcoholic or I'm a drug addict, then what I'm really referring to is that coming full circle, right, of achieving wholeness, as Jung would have said.
Hmm. But it's an interesting shift in perspective by you labeling yourself still as an alcoholic based on the narrative that we live on outside, the external influences of any label to be an active definition of self-identifying.
So it does seem so it might seem like that to those on the outside. So this is sort of one of those I like Gabor Mate speaks about addiction
Mhm.
and alcoholism and sort of the trouble of identifying oneself in those terms, for the rest of one's life.
Yeah.
Um, but I find that to be a limited perspective.
Okay.
Jung said that compulsion is the great mystery of human life.
Right.
And what that means for me is that all of us experience compulsions from time to time.
Mhm.
The problem that we have in life is that the ego can't see it. Most people are unaware of the fact that they're being compelled, throughout the course of the day, most of the time.
Mhm.
So the ego suffers from a delusion of control. So it's always trying to manage the outcome of every single situation, my situation,
Mhm.
your situation, their situation. Just ask me, I have all the answers.
Mhm.
And every ego is suffers from this same sort of delusion of control. I think where drug addicts and alcoholics have somewhat of a spiritual advantage is that they can't hide from their delusion of control for very long. It becomes so destructive and deadly that they either it becomes a split. It's a dilemma. They can either die an alcoholic death or they can live on a spiritual basis. They alcoholics typically don't have any other choice.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so what's happened there is that the self has created this insoluble dilemma, and the alcoholic is forced to admit that he or she does actually suffer from a delusion of control.
Mhm.
And so going back to what, Gabor Mate might say, or someone else about labeling oneself as an alcoholic for the rest of one's life, um, that what it means to me is that so if I label myself that way, it's really kind of it's a remembrance or a recognition of the fact that my ego doesn't have all the answers. And that for as long as I live, I will need help from both a higher power as well as a community in order to navigate the troubles that I run into in life. Otherwise, I fall into that same old trap of, running the show.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So now you've dedicated your life, if you will, or your future projection of who you are and where you're going to supporting others through that journey. What was the tipping point when you said, yeah, this is what I'm here to do and this is what I'm going to do?
That's a beautiful question. So when I was about, I think I was probably 17 or 18, I had joined a religious organization, and I had what I consider a sort of a spiritual experience, if you will, kind of a mystical experience.
Mhm.
And it didn't keep me sober and clean for very long. A few years later, I relapsed and I found myself going in and out of a 12-step program, of many 12-step programs, actually, until finally in 2013, I had sort of exhausted every possible means of trying to combat my own addiction, including the 12 steps. And and I was sitting on the curb, and I was I was homeless, technically speaking. I was about an inch away from having to, crawl behind a bush and take a nap. It was pretty bad. And I, I had this strange experience, where I looked around at my surroundings. I was in Las Vegas in front of a big casino, and I noticed that nobody was looking at me. And for whatever reason, it struck me that the reason they weren't looking at me was because I looked like a homeless person and that they were afraid I was going to ask them for something. And so, for whatever reason, that sort of was an awakening for me. And I realized that for all these years, I had been trying to do things according to my own sort of understanding of the way things should be,
Mhm.
mainly spirituality. The 12 steps had been telling me one thing, and I had been secretly telling myself that they don't really know what they're talking about, right? And it's that old delusion of control, the ego.
Mhm.
So Jungians like to say that the ego suffers from an assumption of omniscience. In
Mhm.
the 12 steps, they say that, it's the joke is I always think I'm the smartest person in the room.
Mhm.
And so for me, the self was able to combat that delusion by, through the addiction, the psycho-spiritual disease of addiction. And so the moment for me of waking up was literally when my ego realized that it doesn't actually have all the answers.
Mhm.
So what I did at that point was I turned towards the community that I was seeking help from, and I started asking them, what should I do next? How do I live my life? How do I rebuild a life after all the trouble that I've caused myself and
Mhm.
my family? So and luckily, for alcoholics and drug addicts and all kinds of different behavioral problems, et cetera, the 12-step programs are very effective in helping one to rebuild their life.
Mhm. Mhm. And it's a journey to even do that. I'm not I've not experienced it. I haven't gone through that journey. However, I would imagine that there are lots of other tentacles attached to that journey. Whatever, regardless of whatever the addiction is, the process of it, be it community, be it reflection of self, be it changing your environment, all those other facets that put one in an environment either of trigger and or of support. It's the environment in itself externally, but also how much work we do internally. Because as you've said, your awakening or your process or your aha was really about yourself. It was the inward perspective that you took that I think is interesting of how that flip and that switch happened for you, which I think is indicative for a lot of people. However, you chose to call it in.
Yes, I think it's fascinating as well. So often we want to sort of imagine, I think, that these spiritual awakenings or these aha moments are going to be moments of light and joy and peace, when really they're they can actually be frightening.
Yes.
Because it's in my case, it's almost as if the objective psyche held up a mirror and showed myself to
Hmm.
myself.
Hmm.
For the first time ever, I had maybe caught a glimpse of how the rest of the world was seeing me.
Hmm.
And I think that, Jung said that men and women cannot conquer the polarity of their nature without without going through the experience of a psychic process that that basically works them rather than they working it.
Right.
And so um, I find that very interesting in terms of addiction because on one hand, I for me personally, I was driven to consume alcohol and drugs by by a part of my psyche, I guess, that
Hmm.
literally wanted to kill me.
Hmm.
And and but what's happened through the process of recovery is that now, and I see this with many people around and stuff, that um there's a similar sort of compulsion taking place in the rooms, I guess, where
Mhm.
12 step meetings are held, is that the people who have found recovery are similarly compelled towards actions that are kind of uplifting and helpful. They give all of their time. There's people that travel all around the world just speaking, and often my friends and I mean, and it's no credit to us. We just love doing this. What we give our time to rehabilitation centers, detox centers. We'll
Right.
go in there and share our story, give out our phone numbers, just trying to throw a lifeline to people who are also struggling.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating that people who were once sort of abhorred by the idea of service or of spiritual principles now can dedicate their lives to this program with monkish discipline, right? So there's an aspect of compulsion, going back to the idea of the archetype. On the one hand, it's dark, and on the other hand, it's light.
Hmm.
Compulsion functions on both sides of that spectrum as well,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
It drives people to do things that they would rather not do. It
Yeah.
forces the ego into these dilemmas. But then on the other hand, a person can find themselves completely transformed and suddenly able to handle life almost with ease,
Yeah.
and sort of almost stumble into enlightenment as if by divine accident, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful thing, this spiritual process. I love the combination of Bill Wilson's, insights. He was the author of the 12 steps. He wrote the book called Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mhm.
And combining his insights with Jung's interpretation of psycho-spiritual transformation, it really makes for an astounding kind of study, because it kind of elucidates this process that none of us have really been able to put our finger on or to define. By nature, it's a transcendent process.
Mhm.
But to kind of start to grasp it in these more kind of clear terms, I've just found it to be an incredible journey. That's why I decided to write about it in my book.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, because I just, it's been such a defining process for me. Jung used the word vocation,
Hmm.
in terms of like a spiritual vocation. So it has nothing to do with how we make money or anything. But
Right.
for me, writing became a vocation, and so the process of writing the book was also one of me being compelled. And what emerged out of there is just, I feel like it's just a really beautiful, exposition of
Mhm.
spirituality in modern times. So
It's quite the journey, whichever way you do it, whether if you delve into other philosophies and principles, or whether you do it whether you do it just by opening pockets of awareness as you move through life. It's quite the journey, and I think it takes a lot of discipline, it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of bravery to get to that space and perhaps be truly uncomfortable with yourself in that process, but also recognizing people around you being uncomfortable. So I imagine that has echoed out pretty loud for you in your life. I know it has in mine. What are the attributes and what are the skills and qualities have you developed over the years that keep you on purpose, that keep you on track? Because, as we've said, our external world can be really loud in encouraging and highlighting these experiences to take us down that rabbit hole on a downward spiral really quickly.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the thing that has been most, I guess, paramount in my life recently for the last 2.5 to 3 years is that my wife and I have been seeing a therapist, a couples therapist weekly, and then we each have our own therapist that we
Mm.
also have been seeing weekly. And um the what I've found that to that's sort of grown out of that is a really profound process of making the darkness conscious. um, which is, that so often in my life, I tend to react to situations based on something unconscious within me, that I'm not aware of, and I don't know where it stems from, but it's something in me is triggered, and then I find myself becoming defensive, being really difficult to talk to. Um, you know, I tend to show a lack of empathy. Just all of these things that were sort of cultivated out of my upbringing is, that's what I've been able to attribute it to. And so the current practice is that her and we both try to participate in our relationship with as much conscious awareness as we can.
Mm.
And we try to, like, almost, in a loving way, like, point out when either myself or her, and she'll do it to me, is like, hey, it seems like we're reacting now instead of, like, being present with each other. And so, the nature of our relationship has changed, and it's been a wonderful process. Sadly, however, we find ourselves almost growing distant from our friends that, we've had for a long time, and we're still friends, and we maintain contact, but it does feel like a lonely journey.
Mhm.
I guess the deeper we delve into self, the fewer souls there are around to
Right.
accompany us on that journey. So
Exactly.
that's why I just really appreciate, like, the work you do, and
Mm.
other podcasters and authors, and because for us seekers, it's nice that we have, people who understand, that we can find community,
For sure.
because so often we find ourselves sort of growing beyond what we're used to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it teeters back into that conversation about how influential our environment really is. So when we unravel and peel back the layers of our own onions, we get to a place where we need different kind of soil to be living in now.
yeah, absolutely.
And that's a natural organic process that I think everybody should go on, or everybody has the opportunity to go on, but not everybody is willing enough to be there.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a reason that Jung used the term individuation to
for sure.
describe the process, because what we find ourselves doing is really, you know, we separate ourselves from the collective more and more, and
For sure.
ironically, as we do that, we find we have more to provide for the collective, but we find ourselves being a little bit more and more separate.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's this kind of paradoxical push pull that takes place, and it's kind of sad, really. I mean, I talk to my therapist about it all the time, about how I just don't feel the same connections with people. And, she tells me over and over, she's always, reminding me that it's normal. It's perfectly normal, in this process, as one awakens more and more, they're more and more aware of how asleep everybody, is, including oneself. So
But in the same token, there's always somebody else or a group of people, a tribe, a community. Those have been languages and words that have taken flight, I guess, over the last 3, 4, 5 years of when people go on their own evolutionary journey and they want to seek a different crowd, a different community, people that speak the same language, have the same energy. So it is out there, Cody. You know it's out there. I know it's out there. It's just us being courageous enough to make that change, to step into it and to explore it, explore all the opportunities that it comes with. With the journey that you're on, what is the intentions that you now have with your mastery? Yes, it is to support others and guide others on their journey. Is there something else that you want to highlight for individuals and for yourself?
sure. I mean, my intentions are a couple, they're of twofold. So my relationship to the 12-step fellowships, will it kind of remains unchanged, because we get to participate with the newcomers and carry the message. We don't get paid for that. It's for fun and for free. And that's a really, just really profound experience. It's very, very life affirming. And I think on the other hand, I've published this book now, and that I just it's almost as if the book is like it's almost like it's like a little boat now that's taking me down the river, and I don't know where it's going to lead. I'm continually sort of surprised by the response that I get from people.
Mhm.
um, I've been doing a lot of podcasts. I'll be doing more of those.
Yes.
I think I'll be doing some speaking at different historical conventions for 12 step fellowships, um, because my book does talk a lot about Jung's own psychological journey and how
Yes.
that relates directly to the 12 steps
Yes.
and it's original research. So it's I'm in the middle of the most exciting time of my life. So I'm very excited about the future, and I have no idea what awaits.
Yeah.
So
And what a beautiful gift that you get to do that, having been through your journey and witness others on the other side of that too, as
mhm.
they click and link to those aha moments for themselves. What a beautiful gift. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So how does Cody look at himself differently than what he did 5, 10 years ago?
Hmm. Well, I don't know. I mean, I I've always been a seeker, and I've always wanted to do the work. And I've fancied myself as someone who was doing the work. Um, and I wonder if, in 5 or 10 years I'll look back on this time and think the same thing. But the I don't know. I think if I was to really boil that down, and this might sound kind of arrogant, but I perceive myself as somebody who can, I can accomplish the things that I set out to accomplish. Um, I feel very blessed that for for the disciplines that I do enjoy,
Hmm.
the ones that require me to sit down and write a book or do therapy, do meetings. I feel very blessed in that regard because I see so many people that they don't have the willingness,
Yeah.
and I don't know that it's just such a gift. I don't find my own discipline to be of my own doing. My own ego hasn't really been able to do much of anything throughout life, but for some reason I have the willingness to do the things that are most important. And I'm super excited and blessed for that. Like I see people struggle, and I wish I had like a magic pill that I could give them or something just to try to help them to have the discipline that they need. But it's a mystery. We don't know where that comes from. So, and once we have it, the best we can do is just to try to keep, hang on to it and cultivate it to the best of our ability and try to give back as much as we can.
And keeping the momentum going, right? So when you're in momentum and you're in that motion, then it's easier to bring others on board and ride the wave, if you will, which I think is a beautiful gift that you get to have and
Mm,
others get to witness and experience as you go through this journey. Because I'm a true believer, everybody's here for a very specific reason. And your reason potentially at this juncture of your life could be to support others on their journey of whatever addiction they may be challenged with. However, you get that opportunity to do it because you have harnessed all these other skills and attributes that put you in a place of fulfillment and
absolutely.
balance. And I think that's a beautiful gift of reflection, of giving yourself a deeper element of meaning for what you want out of your life and to be able to give back in such a beautiful way. So
Yes.
it is,
Yes.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And the mastery of your own self in recognizing perhaps these moments where there's triggers for you and there's you being able to witness yourself in others. So we can all go through life and perhaps witness and recognize our child self as adults in other children. And I think part of the mastery of self is witnessing ourselves in others' journeys.
Absolutely. I I find myself it's almost like, every time I have a sort of maybe a complaint or like a judgment of somebody else, there it's always a reflection of something in me that
Always.
is there. Sometimes maybe I feel like I've outgrown it, or but then I always have to wonder too, um, because I'm a firm believer that I can't really see myself
Mhm.
the way others do,
Mhm.
so um one of the practices that I've had to really begin to cultivate lately is that um a lot of people I find are very interested in telling me how they think it should be, and even perhaps telling me what I should do,
Mm.
you know, in quotes. Um and it's so I find it an interesting practice to just give that space and to try to consider what it is that they're saying. Um, since I don't it's almost like the world, humans they're far more interested in telling you what they think than hearing what you have to say, right? Um, so I find myself trying to listen as much as possible and just consider, and I guess trusting that when it's my turn to share, then I'll go ahead and share. Um, One of the best things about writing a book I found was, and this is, it's kind of funny, is that, you get to say what you want to say without being interrupted. So, and if if somebody wants to listen, then they can read the whole book or not,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly. But nevertheless, there was a lot of discipline there for you to be in that space and follow your own narrative of what is it you want to put on paper. So, congratulations on the book.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I want to thank you for your shares in this conversation, but also thank you in taking the courageous step and supporting others on their journey.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cody, for this conversation. I appreciate you, and I'm sure the book will support and empower others who are ready to receive it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the work you do too. It's much appreciated.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you. I'm Naranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.